Hey everybody, it's Kippy. So today I want to talk about something that's been rolling around in my head for a while now. And nah, this isn't a rant. It's not a Linden Lab bad episode. Truly, I don't really want to come across that way, despite my own personal frustrations. It's definitely not me saying that Second Life is falling apart or that nobody at Linden Lab cares, because I think there still might be a few good moles left. But seriously, if I didn't care about Second Life, I wouldn't spend so much time thinking about all these things. I mean, I've made friends here. I've built communities here. I've DJ'd some super fun parties here. I've helped organize events here. I've spent a pretty big chunk of my life here. And if you're listening to this, you've probably put a huge piece of yourself into Second Life too. That's why I think this conversation matters. So, the question I want to explore today is actually pretty simple. Did Linden Lab evolve from we're building a world together to we're operating a product for customers? Because when I look at a lot of the conversations happening around Second Life lately, it kind of feels like that's the main underlying question. Whether people are talking about governance, or harassment, or feature requests, or marketing, or development priorities, or trust, the same theme keeps popping up. A lot of residents seem to feel like something about the relationship between Linden Lab and the people who actually live in this world has changed. But maybe they're wrong. Maybe Second Life has always worked this way. Maybe we're looking back at the old days through nostalgia goggles. Maybe we're remembering the past a little differently than it really was. But maybe we're not. Maybe something really has changed. Maybe there has been a cultural shift, a shift from seeing residents as collaborators to seeing residents as customers. And just to be clear, I'm not saying Linden Lab shouldn't run a business. Of course they should. Servers aren't free. Developers aren't free. Running a virtual world isn't free. The question isn't whether Linden Lab should be a business. The question is whether something important gets lost when a world starts feeling more like a businessman's investment than a shared project. And when relationships change, residents notice. Because here's the thing. Trust might be one of the most valuable things Second Life has. Trust that the people making decisions understand the people who actually spend their time living in this world. Trust that resident concerns are being heard. Trust that governance is working. Trust that harassment is taken seriously. Trust that development is moving forward. Trust is more valuable than land, more valuable than Premium Plus memberships, more valuable than Linden dollars and how we spend them. And trust takes years to build, but only a moment to damage. So the goal of the following debate isn't to decide whether Linden Lab is right or wrong. That's not really the point. The point is to explore why some of us residents seem to be feeling more disconnected from the company that oversees the world that we helped create. Because if those feelings are becoming more common, then understanding them might be one of the most important conversations we can have about the future of Second Life. So let's jump into the debate.
Welcome to the debate. Imagine you've spent the last 20 years tending to a massive community garden. You didn't just plant the seeds, right? You built the irrigation systems, you laid the brick pathways, and, organized the harvest festivals.
Yeah, you put real sweat into it.
Exactly. And for a long time, the people who owned the land were right there in the dirt with you. They treated you as a collaborative partner. But recently, it feels like they've retreated to a glass office overlooking the plot.
Right. They're managing from above now.
Today is June 5th, 2026, and we are looking at a new report by KiCKFLiP Numbers titled, "Can Second Life Still Feel Like a World We're Building Together, or Has It Become a Product We're Simply Paying to Use?"
It's a really fascinating question.
It really is. Reading through KiCKFLiP's findings, I was really struck by this growing sense of loss among the residents.
I noticed that too.
Yeah, it feels like Linden Lab's cultural shift toward a traditional metrics-driven business model is unintentionally eroding the foundational trust of the very people who built the world.
I read the same report, and look, I absolutely see why residents are feeling that way. It's a very emotional topic.
Definitely.
But I think what gets labeled as, corporate distance or stagnation by the community is actually just deliberate, rational risk management.
How so?
Well, Linden Lab's cautious, stability-first approach isn't an abandonment of the residents. It is an absolutely necessary evolution for responsibly stewarding a highly complex 20-year-old virtual economy.
I want to dig right into that tension, because Second Life is uniquely vulnerable to the erosion of user trust. I mean, the residents are not merely consumers of a product.
Right.
If you subscribe to a streaming service, you're paying to watch content someone else made. If they change the interface, you might be annoyed, but, well, it's still their content.
You're just a passive consumer.
Exactly. In Second Life, the residents are the creators of the world's businesses, the events, the role-play regions, the educational programs. KiCKFLiP's report captures this growing sentiment that Linden Lab's moving away from the collaborative ideals that once defined the platform.
Shifting more toward a customer model, yeah.
Yeah, where residents feel treated as mere customers. And the danger here isn't just about losing a few platform features. It is the slow drain of trust. Once you lose the trust of the platform's core creators, it is incredibly difficult to get them to keep investing their time and creativity.
I look at the same dynamic, but I come at it from a completely different angle. We have to recognize that Second Life is a massive anomaly in the tech industry.
Anomalous in what way?
The rise of modern social media and multiple virtual reality hype cycles. And crucially, it has a real money economy.
Right, that's a huge factor.
People pay rent, earn salaries, and manage virtual real estate empires. So when critics point to corporate distance, they are often ignoring the extraordinary complexity of this ecosystem.
Because the stakes are so high?
Exactly. Aggressive changes or heavy-handed interventions carry the immense risk of breaking legacy systems or destroying actual, real-world livelihoods. Cautious stewardship has to come first. Sometimes, responsible management looks like inaction from the outside.
Okay, but to really understand why residents feel so alienated by that inaction, we have to look at how the psychological contract between Linden Lab and its users has evolved. Let's go back to the Tao of Linden.
Oh, the old 2006 philosophy.
Right. This was drafted around 2006 during Philip Rosendale's era. It was a formal, internal philosophy that emphasized radical transparency, resident empowerment, and employees being deeply immersed in the virtual culture.
Yeah, employees were very visible back then.
Very visible. It felt like a shared project. Today, under CEO Brad Oberweger's leadership, the company feels remarkably different. It operates like a conventional, highly efficient tech company with a strict focus on operational metrics and financial sustainability.
Which is what you'd expect from a modern business.
Sure, I completely acknowledge that business discipline is important. But returning to our garden metaphor, it feels like a cooperative has been taken over by a corporate landlord.
I see the comparison.
The residents are looking at this new management style and asking, are we still building this world together? Or am I just renting server space?
I understand the nostalgia for the 2006 era. I really do. But we have to be intellectually honest about what the Tao of Linden actually was in practice. I just don't buy that it's the right framework for a mature enterprise in 2026. So sweeping massive issues under the rug became the cultural norm rather than addressing them.
That definitely paints a different picture of radical transparency.
Right. Radical transparency sounds like a beautiful concept until you are managing a global platform with modern legal liabilities, strict privacy regulations, and millions of dollars in real money transactions.
Fair point.
Brad Oberweger isn't an abandonment of the residents. It's the only way to ensure the platform actually survives in a highly competitive landscape against newer social VR platforms.
Okay, I can see how a startup philosophy doesn't scale to a global enterprise, but even if the internal operations needed to mature, the external consequence of that shift is a profound sense of abandonment.
Abandonment is a strong word.
It is, but that feeling is most acutely felt when residents interact with governance and community safety. Second Life has historically relied on a decentralized, hands-off approach to moderation, right?
Correct. Estate owners and landowners have the tools to ban or mute bad actors on their own parcels.
Right. But when you are dealing with serial disruptors, people who engage in persistent patterns of harassment, stalking, or manipulation across multiple communities, local parcel control isn't enough.
That's true. They just move to the next parcel.
Exactly. So residents submit reports to Linden Lab and then hit what KiCKFLiP's report calls the perception gap.
Ah, the perception gap being the disconnect between what Linden Lab is actually doing and what residents see them doing.
Yes, precisely. Because investigations are completely confidential, residents never see the enforcement happen. They file a report about a serial harasser, and the next day they see that avatar still walking around.
So they assume nothing happened.
They naturally assume Linden Lab is doing absolutely nothing. And in a tight-knit community, the perception that toxic behavior is being tolerated is just as damaging to trust as the toxic behavior itself.
It definitely breeds resentment.
Right. So if Linden Lab is doing so well financially under this new disciplined leadership, why can't they afford better, more visible community management? Why rely on residents to do the heavy lifting of moderation?
Because, well, you have to look at the sheer mechanics of moderating a synchronous, uninstanced 3D world. It is fundamentally different from moderating a Reddit forum or a Discord server.
How so? I mean, a harassment report is a harassment report, isn't it?
Not at all. On a web forum, you have a text log. A moderator can read the text, see a slur or a threat, and ban the user in 5 seconds.
Sure, it's cut and dry.
In Second Life, you are adjudicating spatial, real-time disputes. Who stood where? Who used what gesture? Who played a specific audio file to disrupt an event? Often, community disputes involve competing narratives, weaponized reporting, and complex social misunderstandings.
So it's much harder to investigate.
Exactly. If Linden Lab acts aggressively on incomplete evidence, they risk false accusations and massive community fragmentation. It requires forensic investigation of a 3D space, which is incredibly difficult to scale. But more importantly, you have to factor in what KiCKFLiP's report calls the economic incentive dilemma.
Right, the reality that a single resident might have a massive economic footprint. Are you saying some users are literally too big to ban?
I'm saying the collateral damage of a ban has to be weighed carefully. You aren't just deleting an avatar's forum account. If Linden Lab removes a major estate owner or a massive event organizer because of a behavioral complaint, they might instantly devastate hundreds of innocent tenants.
Who suddenly lose their virtual homes with no warning.
Exactly. You disrupt the creators who rely on those events for income, and you cut off the real-world salaries of the people that the estate owner employs.
Wow, the ripple effect is huge.
It is. The caution Linden Lab exercises here isn't about protecting the revenue generated by one toxic user. It is about avoiding massive collateral damage to an interconnected, fragile ecosystem.
You make a fair point about the massive landowners. I agree you can't just flip a switch and vaporize an estate without considering the downstream effects on innocent tenants. But I have to push back on the long-term logic of that caution. If protecting the economy means allowing toxic, disruptive behavior to fester because the perpetrator's economic footprint is too large, doesn't that eventually drive away the very people you are trying to protect?
You mean the broader community?
Yes. The core creators, the mentors, the people who run the smaller, culturally vital communities. They burn out. They log in less frequently. They stop organizing events. The cost of losing the trust of your most dedicated everyday residents is far greater than the temporary economic shock of removing a bad actor. If people feel that enduring harassment is simply an accepted cost of participating in the economy, they will pack up and leave.
But the phrase allowing toxic behavior to fester implies that Linden Lab is looking the other way purely for profit, which even the report admits there is no empirical evidence of.
That's true. There's no proof of that.
Right.
The reality is that legal and ethical privacy concerns prevent Linden Lab from publicizing disciplinary actions. Yes, that creates a communication vacuum. Yes, it creates the perception gap.
And a lot of frustration. Absolutely. But the alternative, publicly broadcasting the details of investigations, exposing personal information, or taking on massive legal liabilities by naming and shaming users, is completely non-viable for a modern tech company. The residents have to rely on the localized tools they are given, which are incredibly robust. Estate owners can establish entirely private environments, restrict access, and enforce their own rules. Expecting a centralized corporate governance department to seamlessly resolve every interpersonal conflict in a massive, diverse virtual society is placing an unrealistic expectations on the platform.
This feeling of a communication vacuum in governance doesn't exist in a vacuum, does it? I mean, if you feel ignored when you report harassment, you're perfectly primed to feel ignored when a user interface bug hasn't been fixed in 5 years.
The complaints definitely stack up.
They do. Residents evaluate the platform through their lived experience.
Which is totally fair.
When they see long-standing feature requests ignored for years, or when the onboarding process for new users remains impossibly complex, they interpret this as stagnation. Linden Lab can talk about invisible back-end improvements all day long, but if the product feels neglected on the surface, residents are going to feel like the subscription they are paying for isn't being valued.
I hear the frustration. I really do. But we have to be realistic about the engineering mechanisms at play here. This is not a modern app built on Unreal Engine 5. It contains decades of legacy systems. There are millions upon millions of user-created assets dating back to 2004 that still need to render correctly today.
So why does a simple UI update or a quality of life feature request take years to implement?
Because Second Life is a synchronous simulation where the users own the logic of the world. Think of it like trying to change the foundation of a skyscraper while thousands of people are still actively living in the penthouses and paying rent.
That sounds like a nightmare for the developers.
It is. If the engineering team changes how rendering calls are made to update the UI, it could inadvertently break a 15-year-old script running inside a user's custom-built virtual vehicle or crash a highly customized roleplay server. And this ties directly into the real-world economy. We have to talk about Telia.
Right, Telia being the payment system Linden Lab spun off. Break that down for us. What does Telia actually mean for the engineering team making changes to the platform?
Well, Telia isn't just a basic payment processor for digital swords and shields. It is a fully licensed money transmitter, regulated by federal financial authorities.
So it's treated like a real bank in some ways.
Very much so. We're talking about millions of actual US dollars flowing through the system. People pay their real-world mortgages with the money they make in Second Life.
That is incredible pressure.
Right. So if you push a rushed update in a normal video game and a player loses an item, you issue an apology on Twitter and roll back the server.
Simple enough.
But if Linden Lab pushes a rushed update and it breaks the scripting on a virtual real estate business, the owner can't pay their virtual staff, those staff members can't cash out their virtual currency into US dollars, real-world bank accounts are affected, and federal compliance is instantly on the line.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought about the federal compliance aspect.
It changes everything. The question for the engineering team isn't simply, can we add this cool new feature? The question is, can we add this feature without destroying 20 years of resident investment and triggering a financial compliance disaster? What you perceive as incompetence or stagnation is actually a highly responsible, legally necessary methodology.
Look, I don't disagree that preserving the legacy content is a monumental engineering task.
It's honestly amazing.
It is. I understand the skyscraper analogy, and I understand the massive legal stakes of Telia. But, survival is not the same as thriving.
That's a fair distinction.
Second Life has outlived countless competitors, yes, but today it is competing for attention against incredibly sophisticated sandbox creation platforms, modern social VR spaces, and highly polished user experiences. And if the onboarding is so steep that marketing to new users is essentially futile, then keeping the server foundation stable isn't going to save the city on top of it. KiCKFLiP's report notes that many of Second Life's longest-serving residents are aging alongside the platform.
The demographics are definitely skewing older.
For the ecosystem to survive its third decade, it has to attract new blood. And you do not attract and retain new citizens into a society if the current citizens are visibly disillusioned and feel alienated by a corporate culture that views them as data points.
I entirely agree that onboarding is the fundamental challenge. Marketing can get people to download the viewer, but retention is what matters. However, the steep learning curve isn't a failure of engineering. It is the unavoidable byproduct of the very freedom that makes Second Life unique.
You mean the user-generated aspect?
Yes. You simply cannot have unparalleled, unrestricted user-generated content and infinite customization without introducing immense complexity for the user. As for the veteran users feeling disillusioned, we have to recognize that this friction is a natural byproduct of a platform transitioning from a niche, experimental community into a multi-decade institution.
Growing pains. essentially.
Exactly. The decisions that ensure the platform's survival, financial compliance, strict privacy protocols, conservative code deployment, are inherently unromantic. They do not feel like a collaborative world-building exercise. They feel like corporate management precisely because corporate management is what is required to protect the economy the residents built.
And I think that brings us to the core synthesis of this entire discussion. We are looking at a situation where two conflicting realities are completely true at the exact same time.
I think that's the best way to look at it.
On one hand, your point stands perfectly. Linden Lab's cautious, business-focused priorities, the very things Brad's leadership is executing, are entirely rational. They are necessary for preserving a fragile, incredibly complex virtual economy, maintaining federal compliance with TILIA, and preventing the whole skyscraper from collapsing.
Precisely. They are doing the hard, invisible work of keeping the lights on in a very harsh industry climate.
But on the other hand, those exact same necessary priorities unintentionally create profound feelings of distance, frustration, and declining trust among the platform's most dedicated residents.
I can't argue with that.
When governance is silent to protect privacy, it feels like abandonment to the victim of harassment. When engineering is slow to protect legacy code, it feels like stagnation to the creator trying to use the platform. The necessary actions of the business are actively damaging the psychological contract with the community.
I can accept that duality. It's a very fair assessment. The tension between community stewardship and corporate sustainability is an ongoing balancing act. And, well, there is no perfect equilibrium.
No, there isn't.
We can agree to disagree on whether Linden Lab has permanently crossed the line from viewing users as collaborators to treating them purely as consumers. I maintain that keeping the world alive, stable, and economically viable is the highest form of respect Linden Lab can show its creators. If the servers go dark, the collaborative spirit doesn't matter.
And I maintain that if the creators feel their trust is being taken for granted, the economic stability will eventually fracture from the inside out. It all brings us back to that community garden.
Right, the garden.
The corporate landlord might have secured the municipal permits, ensured the soil isn't toxic, and fixed the water pressure, ensuring the garden doesn't get bulldozed by developers. But if the people who actually plant the seeds feel they are no longer welcome to decide what grows there, they will eventually pack up their tools and find a new plot of land.
It is a profound tension, and it's a question that Linden Lab and its residents will have to navigate together if they want to see a third decade. We will leave it to you, the listener, to form your own conclusions based on the realities of both sides. As Kippy Numbers asked in the final pages of the report, can Second Life still feel like a world we're building together, or has it become a product we're simply paying to use?
Thanks for listening to KiCKFLiP Radio.